Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video I'm going to answer the question that I see thrown around time and time again, and that is string.Empty better, worse, or equals performance-wise to an empty string in C#? And I'm going to try and understand why people think that might be the case and teach you hopefully how you can get to that conclusion on your own, because ideally what you're going to learn out of this video is thought process, not really the answer to that question. If you're just here for the answer, I'm not going to waste your time. The answer is there's absolutely no difference. The performance will be exactly the same. However, if you want to know how we get to that conclusion, then please stick around for the rest of the video. If you like the type of content and you want to see more, make sure you're subscribing, the notification bell to get alerted when I upload a new video. So why do I think people confuse that? Well, there's a combination of things that I think are happening here. First, people know that strings are reference types, and they know that reference types are located on the heap. There are some nuances there, but people know that reference types are located on the heap, so we have that. Then we have the fact that when you try to use string.Empty to something like an attribute or a default parameter, let's say test equals string.Empty, you get the error saying that this needs to be a compile time constant, while if you use empty string, it works fine. So it kind of gets your mind thinking that, hey, this is different. What's happening here? There must be something. And that's true for switch statements as well, and that sort of thing. And then the other thing is that string.Empty is actually a static read-only string instead of a const string. So I think there's many things that sort of facilitate those questions to come about, and the wrong thing here is that people make assumptions, and every time you make an assumption you're gonna lose. The way I try to look at it is I don't trust anybody unless they have a proven track record of being right, and I expect the same for people as well. And to do that you have to learn how to get to those conclusions on your own, and that's how I learned it as well. So let's talk about thought process, right? We're caring mostly about memory allocation, since that's the only thing that truly could actually be different. There could be some performance nuances as well, but mostly memory allocations is what you should be worried about. You know, is this creating a new string every single time, or even is this creating two different strings even though they have the same value, even though they're not value types? What's happening? So the first thing I do is I would take the code and I would look into the intermediate language code. There's a couple of ways to do that. You can either use Writer's IL viewer, but for something that everybody can use as well, you can go to a website called sharplab.io and paste your code there. So that's what I'm going to do here. Now, IL code is ultimately what C# is being compiled into before the CLR picks it up and runs it. And F#, VB.NET, and C#, they all compile to that same IL. Now, you don't need to understand IL, and you don't need to read it or write it, but you should be roughly familiar with identifying patterns. For example, I can see filled private string, empty string, and then empty string too. So they must refer to these. However, if I go down and I click here, they light up. And they light up because the IL code generated points directly to the code on the left. Now, if my head is cropping something, you don't need to worry about, this line, so that's fine. What we want to take a look at is that the code between the two is clearly different. This one is using an LDS FLD, which pushes the value of filled on the stack, while the other one is using an LD str, which pushes a string object for the literal string. So it kind of tells me that the code won't be lowered in some way, and we have a video on what lowering is, to convert string.Empty to the double quote version or vice versa. So we're still in the path that, hey, they're different. Something else that is important is that you can see that this is a CTOR, which is a constructor, which means that C# will be compiled in IL in a way that fields will be initialized instead of just initialization here on the field level through the constructor, because IL doesn't support initialization of fields like this. You don't need to know about that, but when we switch to the next stage of the compilation process, you're going to understand why that's important. So the IL is what the CLR will pick up to run your code, but then after that, there's something called the JIT compiler that will kick in and optimize your code even further during runtime. And if I click on that JIT ASM, I'm going to see the exact instructions on the assembler level that the JIT will compile the code into. And if I click that, we're here again in the exact same CTOR constructor code. So that must be the same code roughly. Now, what can I see here? I can see this 0x and then a hex number and a 0x hex number. And I can see two similarities. I can see two call lines with the same address, and I can see two MOV, which is move, with the same address. And they have the exact same instruction. One is move EAX, move EAX. So that's what I have here, and I understand that they're the same. Now, what do I have that are in patterns of two? I have two empty strings and I have two method calls. Now let's leave the method calls out of the way because we don't really care about them. What we do care about is the strings, and I can see that I'm moving something with a specific address, and that's the same over here. So if I change one of the two strings, you just saw that this second address changed, and that's because the string changed, so the address of the string also changed, which tells me that if I revert that, these two addresses point to the exact same string, which is empty string. So that proves that there's only going to be one memory allocation for that empty string, no matter how you want to use it, whether that's going to be a string.empty or an empty string. So that seals it. It's exactly the same. Now, why is that happening? Well, strings are a bit special in C#, and they're subject to something called interning. It's the idea that we're going to create a memory pool of all the distinct values of the string literals in our code, and then we're going to create pointers to them instead of allocating them time and time again, creating more and more memory allocations for basically no reason. And that way we can do things like this, where we have an address to that string and point to it. And since string.empty will be interned as well, we're going to point to the exact same address everywhere in our code, and that's why. And if I go back to Rider, you can actually do string.isInterned to see if a string is interned, and you can also use string.intern to get a reference to a specific string. Now, you wouldn't know about string interning if you've never actually searched for it, but hopefully you'd be able to tell that these two are addresses. If you change one of the two, this changes here, and this gives you exactly what you need to know. Now, just my 2 cents on the readability subject, because some people say, hey, this is more readable than this, or use this. To me, pick your poison, knock yourself out. To me, it doesn't matter. What matters in that specific thing is consistency. Pick one and stick with it so your code base is cohesive. It doesn't really matter which one you're going to choose. If your concern is performance, don't. If you find this more readable, use that. If you find this, use that. I came from Java and I was using this, and then everybody was using string.empty, so I was kind of forced to change. Not that I think one is more readable than the other. In fact, to me, they're basically the same. I don't necessarily think that if something is shorter, then it's cleaner. In fact, sometimes the opposite is true, especially when you're naming things. But ultimately, to me, consistency on that specific subject is way more important than whatever people think is more clean. So that's my take on it. That's all I had for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my Patreons for making these videos possible. If you want to support me as well, you're going to find the link in the description down below. Leave a like if you like this video, subscribe for more content like this, and ring the bell as well. And I'll see you in the next video. Keep coding.